You can think whatever you want to think about yourself. You can't be anything you want to be. You can't be Napoleon, you can't be Jesus, and you can't be a member of the opposite sex. I mean, the facts of life are the facts of life.
Now expanded dramatically, obviously, right? Harm is anything I don't like. And non-harm is anything that I want to cancel. That is how the definitions have shifted incredibly, incredibly wildly. Are you going to go after people's advertisers and livelihood? And the answer for that on the left is a resounding yes. They want to do that. Cancel culture is not about, you know what? I don't like what Louis C.K. did. I'm not going to his show anymore. And maybe other people shouldn't go to his show. It's not about that. It's about, if you go to Louis C.K.'s show, I won't have dinner with you. If you go to Louis C.K.'s show, this makes you a bad person. If you listen to that Dave Chappelle special, man, no one should listen to Dave Chappelle. And Netflix should be ashamed for even greenlighting that thing. It's about the lower downs at Netflix.
Ben Shapiro, a political commentator, author, and lawyer, has become a leading conservative voice in the fight against woke culture. Known for his sharp rhetoric and unapologetic views, he tackles controversial topics head-on.
Quote-unquote doctors, if any doctor denies to me that there is a dichotomy between male and female, a sexual dichotomy between male and female, they're ignorant and they are letting their politics get in the way of their science. Anybody who suggests to you that there is such a thing, for example, as a pregnant male is not a doctor, they are an activist.
According to Ben, the left invented the term woke, but now distances itself from it, a move he sees as hypocritical. He argues that it is their fault the word became toxic, and he refuses to stop using it.
They teach that trauma between generations. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, trauma very often in a lot of circumstances is passed down. I mean, I know some kids of Holocaust survivors who turned out fantastic and some who didn't. I mean, that's
yeah. Okay, so you are officially woke. That is what wokeness is about. It's like, people's grandparents or their great-grandparents were slaves.
Well, it's okay. No, it's okay.
I'm talking.
For Shapiro, wokeness represents an ideology rooted in falsehoods. He identifies 4 key lies that perpetuate misconceptions about America: inequality, personal responsibility, and the concept of truth itself. Ben asserts that these lies are not just harmless misunderstandings, but deliberate distortions. He points out how wokeness portrays America as inherently evil, denying its historical and cultural achievements.
Because any sentient human being would acknowledge that history has consequences.
Right.
But if the idea is, but that's not what wokeism is. Wokeism is a different thing. Wokeism suggests that all inequalities of today are attributable to not only historic injustices, but also continuing injustices in the now, and that all disparity is attributable to discrimination.
Like that, but a conservative.
Not just that.
A conservative is the only person.
On the topic of inequality, Shapiro criticizes the woke narrative for ignoring individual choices and hard work. He argues that it unfairly blames systemic factors for every disparity. When discussing personal responsibility, Ben accuses a woke culture of promoting victimhood over accountability. He believes this erodes society's moral fabric. Perhaps most concerning to Shapiro is how wokeness manipulates the very idea of truth. By redefining language and concepts, it creates confusion and instability.
There's certainly a spectrum when with regard to effeminateness versus masculinity. That's certainly true, but that does not change the underlying sexual dichotomy that is the basis for all human reproduction.
According to Shapiro, this ever-changing code fosters chaos. He criticizes the intellectual elite, or woke priesthood, who dictate these rules and decide who is absolved of their sins.
If the idea is that traumas of the past invariably bleed down into the present, that does not explain why certain groups that have been historically not only marginalized but slaughtered in mass genocide are some of the most successful groups in our society.
One of Ben's most scathing critiques is aimed at cancel culture, a mechanism he sees as wokeness's enforcement arm. He argues that cancel culture leaves no room for redemption or growth. For Shapiro, the lack of forgiveness in woke culture is a fundamental flaw. He sees it as a dangerous black and white worldview that punishes dissent without nuance.
Their sole complaint is that he allegedly concluded a presentation on how to diversify the museum's holdings by saying, quote, "Don't worry, we'll definitely still continue to collect white artists." That's the whole thing. He said we're going to try and purchase art from people who are not white to diversify our holdings. Also, we'll still buy some art from white people because white people still make some good art. Okay, he was forced to resign his job. He was forced to resign his job over this.
Brands jumping on the woke bandwagon also draw Ben's ire. He questions the sincerity of companies like Ford, which launched a rainbow-themed truck, calling such moves performative. Shapiro doesn't stop at criticizing corporations. He also calls out media figures and institutions, accusing them of being intermediaries that push woke narratives without genuine understanding.
No one has confronted her about her choice to willfully appropriate black hairstyling. We aren't in a post-racial utopia. There's no federal law to protect black people from being penalized for their natural or protective hairstyling. Hell, we're still trying to convince everyone Black Lives Matter. And these kind of posts forced her to then write, "Hello everyone, it's Rachel. I've come to understand far too belatedly, my hairstyle is harmful." No, it isn't. No, it's not.
He humorously notes how some media personalities consult their woke friends to stay relevant, exposing what he sees as their performative virtue signaling. Ben also addresses one of the most polarizing debates, the distinction between sex and gender. He argues that separating the two defies biological reality.
You have claimed that you oppose medical transitioning for these children, namely and specifically to what normally happens is puberty blockers, which you have called it child abuse. Is that correct?
It is. That's correct.
According to Shapiro, gender is intrinsically linked to biology, and attempts to separate them lead to illogical conclusions. This stance has drawn both praise and criticism. He often references Matt Walsh's question, "What is a woman?" to highlight what he sees as the inability of woke activists to provide coherent definitions.
You consider child abuse because you believe that a child is not capable of consenting to what you consider are irreversible procedures. Is that correct?
A damaging, irreversible procedure.
Damaging, okay. Ben, are your children circumcised? Did you circumcise your children?
Yes, I have two sons and they're both circumcised.
Why would you do that? Isn't that kind of hypocritical?
Nope, I'm circumcised, my works just fine.
Ben critiques the medical consensus on trans issues, arguing that it is driven more by politics than science. He accuses politically motivated doctors of abandoning scientific principles.
But you openly support platforms that take away trans people rights and openly do not agree with the fact that men can become women, women can become men.
So number one, that's not taking away anyone's rights. That's a recognition of reality. Also, 2 + 2 = 4 is not a reversal of anybody's rights.
Statements like pregnant males are, for Shapiro, symbolic of the absurdities in woke ideology. He dismisses such claims as activist-driven, not science-based. Shapiro also tackles the woke paradox, the idea that both speech and silence can constitute violence. This no-win situation, he argues, stifles open dialogue. In his view, this redefinition of violence undermines free speech. He sees it as a manipulative tactic to control discourse and suppress dissent.
You have a right to say what you want to say, but you certainly do not have a right to demand that everybody else say it with you. And that's you want to talk about a violation of First Amendment rights or a violation of basic American rights, trying to use the power of government, as so many people on the left have, to force everybody to say things are false in the name of your personal comfort. That's a violation of rights.
Ben frequently points out the contradictions within woke culture, from its inconsistent rules to its selective outrage. These inconsistencies, he argues, reveal its ideological flaws. According to Shapiro, wisdom thrives on emotional appeals rather than reasoned arguments. He believes this approach exploits people's good intentions while promoting harmful policies.
And declaring that everyone else should simply go along with what is in fact a counterfactual statement, a delusion, that's a violation of everybody else's rights. So the idea that you get to project onto everybody else your perception of self is so wild and bizarre a suggestion that it erodes the basic standard of truth and fact that is literally the basic for any even human conversation to take place. If we can't even tell what words mean anymore, if the only perception that matters is my own, that is the essence of narcissism.
He emphasizes that the fight against wokeness isn't just political, it's cultural. Ben sees it as a battle for society's soul, one that requires courage and clarity. Shapiro's critiques extend to education, where he accuses woke ideology of indoctrinating students and argues that it prioritizes activism over critical thinking. In entertainment, Ben highlights how wokeness distorts storytelling. He laments the loss of creativity in favor of politically driven narratives.
It's not about being accepted. It's about you have to accept. Let's say if you're a male and you believe that you're a female, or you're a female and you believe that you're a male, you're going to have to accept the baseline reality that what you think is false about you. Okay, if I think that I'm an amazing basketball player, no matter how strongly I think it, it's not true. And it's going to be, I can think that as much as I want to think it. And the minute I get on the basketball court and I put up a jumper that gets blocked by some dude who's 6'5",
Shapiro argues that social media amplifies wokeness by rewarding outrage and conformity. He sees these platforms as tools for enforcing ideological purity. Despite the challenges, Ben remains optimistic. He believes that exposing the flaws in woke culture can inspire people to resist its influence.
The idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true. Okay, and I'm not denying your humanity if you're a transgender person. I am saying that you are not the sex to which you claim to be.
This American lawyer just shut down a woke student, and you won't believe what happened next.
I'm 20.
As a mathematician and a physicist, what in the hell do you know about human biology?
And you got your law degree from Harvard. What do you know about biology?
From explosive college debates to heated TV showdowns, he's making headlines and takes on the woke agenda.
Word games about how you feel subjectively has no bearing on whether male and female are categories that exist. And if you're trying to define male and female with reference to any subjective category that cannot be identified by any metric whatsoever other than how you feel today, I challenge whether that is scientific or whether that is merely a self-perception that is being guided by a political agenda.
Ben Shapiro is fed up with the woke movement and can't seem to stand it anymore. Known for his unapologetic approach, Shapiro isn't afraid to tackle the most controversial issues in front of everyone, especially when it comes to gender identity. He can't hold it together any longer, and he's speaking his mind out loudly.
And I will just say that anyone who suggests that gender has no reference whatsoever to biology, it's not connected in any way to biology, is just full of shit.
And this is where things get fiery. During an event at a university in Wisconsin, Shapiro got into an argument with a student who thought had the perfect argument.
I can define womanhood for you, which is a set of characteristics associated with females, and a woman as someone who exhibits said womanhood.
Okay, well, you have just used the word female and woman to define each other. So you say a woman is a female, but not a biological female. A female is a woman and a woman is a female, but at no point have you added any new content.
No.
This shows Shapiro's classic response, sharp and direct, defending his strong opinion. Ben Shapiro has always aimed at challenging woke ideas head-on. During a conference, he entered into a debate with a woke activist that is pro-transgender identity. But then he asked her this question.
Let me ask you this. Okay, I won't ask you how old. I will ask you how old you are, okay? Because you're young enough that it's probably not insulting to ask you. So.
I'm 22, so I'm probably young and naive, right?
No. Why aren't you 60?
Why aren't you 60? This seemingly simple question leaves the student scrambling for an answer.
Why aren't you 60? And why can't you identify as 60? What is the problem with you identifying as 60?
Shapiro uses this question to challenge her logic, driving home his point that personal feelings can't change objective facts like age or gender. Let's watch further.
You can't magically change your gender. You can't magically change your sex. You can't magically change your age.
You can still legally change it. People recognize
You can't legally change your age, by the way.
Obviously, you can change your name, you can change your sex, you can change your identity.
Just because you can do things legally doesn't mean that they are correct biologically. You could do.
The woke activist claims that you can change your gender and age just like you can change your name. And that's biological reality? Ben quickly shuts this down with common sense, and he argues that subjective feelings and legal documents may change, but the biological facts of sex and gender remain the same.
I'm not going to go along with the general societal willingness to rewrite basic facets of human nature and human biology, and frankly, mammalian biology, in order to suggest that a delusion is true.
Shapiro insists that biological realities are non-negotiable. For him, these truths, such as the distinction between male and female, are critical points where woke ideologies attempt to blur facts. Ben Shapiro also takes on the argument often made by the woke people that you can't determine someone's gender just by looking at them. But wait till you see how Shapiro doesn't hold back with his counter-argument.
So here's my problem with that particular argument. The answer is that in 99.8%, 99.9% of cases, you absolutely can gender somebody based on looking at them. Like really, if you're going to use intersex people as an example of not being able to do that, this does not obviate the biological duality of sex upon which all progeneration is based for all of human history and for all mammalian species.
But apparently, that wasn't enough. The woke student claimed that gender is a spectrum, and he doesn't have the right to determine someone's gender based solely on their appearance. Shapiro's response? Direct, sharp, and absolutely brutal.
I can have every single biological characteristic of a male, and if I say I am female, then I am female. This is anti-scientific nonsense.
Shapiro's take about tackling this issue is not only about gender identity, it's also about tearing apart flawed arguments. The student was left speechless, completely defeated by Shapiro's sharp logic. And that's just the beginning. Wait until you see what happened on live TV when Ben Shapiro clashed with transgender activist Zoe Tur. Things got fiery.
Stay away from the genetics and back to the brain scans.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
No, I know. Well, but wait, to be fair,
Prior to this escalation, Ben Shapiro referred to Zoe Tur as Sir, and the reaction to that was explosive.
Why are we mainstreaming delusion?
It's not delusion.
Why would you call it delusion?
Because Bruce Caitlyn Jenner, I'll call him Caitlyn Jenner.
No,
because
it's
that's
her. You're not being polite to the pronouns.
Because
disrespectful.
Okay, forget about the disrespect. Facts don't care about your feelings. It turns out that every chromosome, every cell in Caitlyn Jenner's body is male with the exception of some of his sperm cells.
But it didn't stop there. Ben Shapiro didn't back down. This explosive confrontation made headlines, not just on the physical threat, but also due to Shapiro's firm stance on biological truth. This wasn't just a debate, it was a full-blown showdown, and Shapiro refused to be intimidated. This incident became a key moment in the national conversation about free speech and the right to express unpopular views without the fear of violence. Shapiro's ability to remain calm under pressure and articulate his message with clarity and conviction earned him both respect and criticism. In Shapiro's world, facts don't care about your feelings or threats, and his boldness didn't stop there. In 2017, he went head-to-head with conservative transgender activist Blair White.
Pronouns are designed to differentiate between men and women, and that transgender women are not biological women, and that anything that attempts to overcome that argument is obfuscation rather than clarification.
This debate had a different tone, less combative, but still intense. Shapiro began by recognizing everyone's right to live how they choose, but he didn't shy away from making his position clear.
I would try to avoid specifically offending you by using a pronoun that you don't like, but I also am not going to bow to the sort of social convention now that I'm supposed to use a pronoun of people's choosing rather than a pronoun that accurately describes the truth.
While they agreed on some points, certain points still asked for more compassion. But Shapiro stood his ground by making a clear distinction between respecting personal rights and endorsing ideas he believes contradict scientific reality. His message? Society shouldn't be compelled to accept identities that go against biological facts. But here's another instance where things got heated. At a conference at the University of Southern California, Shapiro's debate triggered massive protests.
Is everybody in the United States entitled to the same rights? Of course, but your right does not extend to forcing me to call you what you want me to call you. That's not the way this works. That violates my freedom of speech.
This debate goes one step further when the girl in the audience pointed Ben Shapiro out on calling transgender a mental illness. And this is what Ben had to say.
If they say that's discrimination, they're overly applying their own label.
I think when you say like they're mentally ill, like that gives off
I have said, and I will continue to maintain, that gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder, whichever DSM you choose to use, is a mental illness.
Ben Shapiro stated that his opinion is not meant in a violent way, because those transgender people are really suffering. He only tries to point out the following.
The point that I'm making is that when a society begins treating folks who have mental illness as though they are representing an objective reality, they are doing no service to the people who actually suffer from a mental illness.
Shapiro takes his argument even further when it comes to protecting kids from transgenderism. He strongly believes that woke ideologies are pushing the dangerous idea that children should be allowed to make life-changing decisions too early in life.
And banning people who are adults. Children I'm in favor of banning because now you're talking about somebody who's not capable of consent. Right? All of our laws are based on the ability of people to consent. If you're a child, you can't consent. So I'm very much in favor of banning gender transition for kids.
Shapiro is particularly passionate about protecting the younger generation from these impulsive choices, stressing how serious the long-term effects can be. As you've seen throughout the video, Shapiro has made it clear he will keep fighting against woke ideologies and base opinions on facts and biology to protect the younger generation. He has had enough of this insanity. It's time to move beyond the pressure to bend to every demand and be canceled for everything you say. He will stand up for free speech and push back against ideas that distort biological facts. Whether you agree with him or not, his fearless approach to addressing these issues is something few are willing to do. But he can't do it alone. What do you think? Do you agree with Ben Shapiro's opinion? Should we stand up for facts and have real conversations, or keep silencing those with different views? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more bold discussions.